All right, I think we're good. All right, so I've been wanting to talk to you for like years, and now now is my chance.
Okay, cool.
Um, yeah, so I was gonna wear my cat shirt, but I couldn't find it. But I have this bag here. Look at this.
Oh, nice. Very nice.
It says bookstores, cats, life is sweet. I got this at the UCSD bookstore, and I got a shirt as well. It's the exact same.
But
So
the
pretend like I'm wearing that shirt.
nice.
Except
I
I
love
couldn't
it.
find my shirt, but I have my bag. But I bring that bag with me out, and it's
That
great.
cat looks really comfortable
It's
on
really
that book.
comfortable. It's like he's really just lounging. He's not really even trying to do any work. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Um, well, cat story related to that then. Uh, my cat is named MPEG. I used to have a cat named JPEG, so JPEG and MPEG. And a friend of mine from grad school has some cats named NumPy and SciPy, or Numpy and Skippy. I'm not sure like
I
how
saw
you
that
want to
on
pronounce
Twitter.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And they have an Instagram account as of yesterday. So they are
Oh,
like adorable little cats. And I love their names. And you should go find them on Instagram. I think it's their
okay.
name
I'll
is
put
like
the
Pie
link.
and
Yeah.
Pie.
I
Yeah.
have your Twitter all up here. I'm trying to like put all the link in the show notes. These are essential. I used to like listen to the podcast again later and just like put notes, but now I realize it's much easier for me to type up the notes as we talk about them.
Yeah, that makes
So,
sense.
so I don't have to go back. Yeah, I think I originally knew you from your cats on your website. Your claim to fame, like 5 years ago or whatever.
Yeah. Okay, cool. What else do you remember about those cats?
About those cats, that they were long. Were they long?
Oh, there was a time that I like held my cat up in front of the camera and so it looked really long
Yeah,
and maybe
I'm amused by the. I mean, there's the long cat memes too, right? There's the
yeah.
typical long cat memes. I'm amazed by how long they can get and then how scrunched up they can get.
Yeah.
But yeah, I've always been a cat fan, but I don't actually have any cats, so I'm just like a poser. I'm like a cat poser.
Why not? Why don't you have a cat? Do you want a cat? Should you
I
get
think
a cat
I
or
thought
is
I'm
it
allergic. I think there's some allergy issues, so
okay?
I'm an admirer of other people's cats, basically.
That makes
Um,
sense. It's enough to like there's so many cats on the internet, so many cats, at your friend's house, whatever, that you can get your cat fix
yeah, and
without
like,
having one.
well, I mean, there's a lot of dogs outside because, like, in Southern California is great for dogs because it's like great weather year round. So, like, I feel like dogs are overrepresented because, like, everything you see outdoors is dogs, right? But you don't actually see people's cats unless you go to their houses.
Yeah.
Do people walk cats outdoors, or are there outdoor? I mean, there are outdoor cats who just kind of wander around. I mean, what's the outdoorness in cats?
Um, Tapping into my cat expertise knowledge, which is like buried deep in my brain. Sometimes cats are like indoor cats, sometimes they're indoor outdoor cats. Sometimes cats just like live outside all the time. And when I adopted MPEG and JPEG, they made me sign a little thing that was like, I will keep these cats indoors so that they won't like get eaten by animals, they won't get hit by cars, they will live a safer life. But where I live in Santa Cruz currently, Emmy, MPEG, like we let her outside. She goes outside now. They
I know.
seem to
Hopefully,
enjoy
people, the
it.
adoption people aren't watching this podcast. You're gonna like take.
Yeah. And then I've heard of like some cats do like to be walked on leashes. I've had a friend that had a cat that would like let you put on a little leash and like walk it around outside. But I've maybe tried to do that with my cats and they have none of it.
I
So
guess you have to train them from young age to like get used to that.
yeah, or just like get really lucky with your cat's personality that like it does like walks.
It
Don't
does
think
like walks. Yeah. And I guess like the non-cat motivation was this other tweet you sent. All I do is just look at people's Twitter feeds all day. This tweet about like, you this is like a few weeks ago talking about thinking about, having the freedom to explore and learn and thinking about these things and such. So like I'm just curious about, what your current, you know, life and career thoughts are in terms of this sort of independent learning and creativity and research thing because I'm super fascinated by this.
uh oh gosh, this is like a big big thing right now. So some of the backstory is I was working at a startup called Style for the past 3.5 years, and we were doing visual search for furniture and home decor and other aspects of retail. And it was this really cool company. You could like take a picture of a piece of furniture and we'd know exactly what the item was if we had it in our database, or we'd find stylistically similar things. And from that we could like look at entire scenes, like living rooms with all the different furniture in it, and like see what furniture goes together. And then the hope was you could take a picture of something and it would suggest like complementary products or like whole room designs. Or if you're like in your own home and you're like, I don't know how to make my space look nice, you could take a picture of like one thing that you had and then get all these design ideas for doing yeah, like better design. And that company got acquired by Facebook in January, and I am not working at Facebook, so I am now like free and unemployed and figuring out what to do with my life. And one of the reasons why I was like, I don't want to go work for Facebook is I have like 90% of a PhD done and sort of paused it for 4 years and kind of want to go back and finish it. And I also want to know just what other things do I want to work on if I am directing my own thoughts and plans and stuff like that. So I was tweeting about like having that freedom. I'm not like I haven't fully dove back into academia, although the last few weeks I have been like reading stuff and writing stuff and like embracing it a little bit more. But I'm just like, what do I want to think about? What do I want to work on? What are some old ideas from the past that like I didn't get to do while I was at my startup? Like, what can I do instead?
Yeah, this is an interesting case study because, like, especially in AI and the stuff. I mean, 4 or 5 years, half a decade, so much in the world has changed. So, like, a lot of these, maybe older ideas, maybe they were not as feasible for a grad student to work on 4 or 5 years ago. But now, like, with all these toolkits and frameworks and data sets and stuff, maybe it's like, oh wow, this is like so tackleable and tractable now. And it was great that I waited this half decade for the world to, do all that groundwork and so that I could do this stuff now.
Yeah. Um, yes. I'm thinking like gotta like ask more questions, get more prompts, so I could totally like pull out some old like I don't know.
Yeah, I guess, like, I mean, I don't know anything particular, but like that's one thing I've noticed, right? That, like, even in my own world, you know, I've been in a more traditional academic world for a while, but like a lot of these things I thought about in grad school, I don't have like super specific examples off the top of my head, but like I'm like, oh yeah, it would be great to do something in this realm, 5, 6, whatever years, early 2010s, basically, right? And I'm like, yeah, I guess it's not super tractable to do now, or it's not fashionable, or people aren't doing this kind of work. And then now, like, people really care about this kind of stuff, and like that's kind of the privilege that we get being in a more research setting, that you can revisit some of these ideas later on, and that it's I found some of this because I was looking through my old notes from like grad school, and like most of it is just kind of noise, but some of them I'm like, oh yeah, like this is totally what I'm doing right now, and I didn't realize that I wanted to do this 5, 10 years ago. But I just never, it was just kind of a half-baked thought. So like I'm sure you're going to have moments that click like that, whether you're finishing your PhD or you're doing other stuff that's maybe more startup related or other stuff. Like those kinds of like clicking moments is really cool because, like, oh whoa, it's a cool feeling.
Yeah. One of my projects from like the beginning of grad school was this game called Photo City, where people will go outside and they take lots of photos and then use those photos to make 3D reconstructions of the buildings like on their school campus. And that we intended for people to like go take photos with their mobile phones, but like iPhones had like just barely been out, and cell networks were really slow, and we wanted people to take like hundreds of photos, and you could really only take a couple at a time through the mobile network. So we wound up kind of changing the way that the game worked, where people would go out with like a normal digital camera, like a digital camera that was just a digital camera, and walk around and like take a bunch of pictures, and then like go inside to a computer connected to
Yeah,
fast
yeah.
internet and upload their photos.
So
But
2000. So 2000.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it worked, and people would use their mobile phones as well, but they'd use it sort of more as a camera, and they just kind of look at the app to get a sense of where to go, and then just like go into photo mode and do the uploading later, and and that worked at the time, um, and but I think now, like, there could be ways to, if there's a photo city too, if there's something else where you're like taking photos, you could take a couple of photos, upload them, get feedback like right in the moment where you are, and like not have to go back inside and do some like super long convoluted process. And so that's definitely one thing of like, well, phones are better, cameras are better, like cell networks are
Well, and
better.
other
There's like
devices,
Wi-Fi
I mean, you can
hotspots
see stuff on
everywhere.
your smartwatches now. I mean, like, you can use your smartwatches as displays and, like, yeah, I mean, devices. I mean, that's one of the kinda, especially in HCI, right, one of these heuristics is just thinking about what commodity technologies are available now, where you have smartwatches, you have phones, like, all these things are so available. So then thinking about ideas from 5 or 10 years ago, which were really a grind to do then, now it's like, "Oh, wow, like, we could actually, kind of push limits what's possible." And same thing with all the AI stuff, right? That there's so much. I think this AI and HCI intersection has so much potential just because nowadays the implementation overhead is just reduced so much from, like, 10 years ago when we were, starting out grad school ish.
Yeah, totally. Um,
So I'm optimistic. I don't know. You're the one who has to do all the hard work, but I'm just optimistic. I'm just kind of cheering on.
yeah. I am there's like too many like partial thoughts, and like they're not coming in as words right now. Like intersection of AI and HCI, like yes, totally. I think those are coming together, and they're coming together more now than they were before. And I wonder what all the different parts of it are that are making it like viable now. Is it like that there are better tools out there, like you can get like machine learning tools and run them yourself, or there's like models that are pre-trained that you can train them more yourself. um, I wish that I knew more about those like off the shelf, easy to use, easy to get started things, and that's actually one of the things that I want to like learn more about right now, because at my startup we had a deep learning system for like recognizing furniture and kind of grokking style, but it was like this big thing that someone had built as a research project in the past, and we'd like productionized it and all that stuff. And um, and I know that there are tools for like doing it yourself, doing it at kind of like different levels, that there's lots of like cloud services now. And I don't fully understand the space, or I haven't like had experience myself to know, um, like, can you just use off the shelf things? Can you adapt them a little bit more? Like, what else can you do? And like, where does one even start?
Yeah.
And
Have you seen this ML5JS project?
no,
Yeah, so ML5JS, so they're like processing back in the day, and like
yeah,
so the processing turned into like P5JS, which is kind of a reimagining of the processing world for JavaScript. And then this ML5JS is this project. I can send you the links for all these. So there's TensorFlow.js, which is the JavaScript port of TensorFlow. So that was made by Google. This was last year. So they made a JavaScript port of TensorFlow because browsers are now pretty fast. So they're able to now just put it all just a JavaScript library, and they have all these demos where you can connect to your webcam and you can wave around and it detects your pose and like puts cat faces on you or whatever, all in your browser. And this ML5JS is like a layer on top because TensorFlow is still pretty low level. You have to know a lot about neural nets and stuff. So this ML5JS, it's like my impression, it's that it's supposed to be kind of like the processing for machine learning. So like really easy to get started, simple API. You just write a few lines, import your data, and then just like train a model and output stuff. So I can send you the link later when I post episode, but that's like a place to get started. And like there's more and more of these, you know, not only JavaScript frameworks, but like, even ones on servers. There's like Google has the Colab, which is like these Jupyter notebooks that connects to their TensorFlow backend. So you can just start writing Python code in your Google Docs thing and then just like display stuff. So like there's a ton to play with. And I guess my heuristic now, I guess if I were in your shoes, is to like just think about what you want to do, and chances are it's like possible to implement just because like machine learning stuff is so accessible. So like the hard challenge, especially with this AI HCI stuff, is think about what like new thing you'd want to do, and then like we'll figure out some way to implement it.
Yeah, yeah, and there'll be so many different tools to plug together that exist. Yeah, I guess another thing from like me doing projects in grad school, like between 5 and 10 years ago, was how I programmed them. It was like globs, spaghetti code of PHP talking to Python servers, talking to C++ programs that like ran on the school cluster and like talked over sockets to other things. And it was just like this thing that somehow I put together with like help from other people.
Like an
But
art piece now. You should just revive that. It's like an art installation, all the spaghetti code that grad students have to write. I mean, everything,
yeah,
everyone did that. It's awesome.
yeah. And now it's like, well, now I have grown as a software engineer and the tools have grown, and like we could just do all this in Python and with services that are out there, and just it'd be so much easier than like connecting to people's mobile phones and making mobile apps that like use the camera but are web apps. Like you don't have to go into the depths of iOS programming or Android programming or anything like that.
Yeah, it's just our way of telling kids, yeah, kids have it so easy nowadays. With the walk, this is like your equivalent of walking uphill in the snow both ways stories.
Yeah, back in my day, like augmented reality was like jittery and shaky, and you could only do it by like looking at black and white QR codes. And nowadays, you can just like turn on your phone and it's smooth tracking on whatever thing is in your environment, because like they finally figured out all that good stuff. And
Yeah, it's wild because like if you think about like, the hackathon scene has been so big in the last, since we were in grad school, after like in the last 5 years, especially for undergraduate, this hackathon thing is big. And because of all these APIs and all like these 2-day hackathon projects is what used to take us as grad students forever to implement, right? Like we do this thing on your phone and then like you detect people's poses and you can do an augmented reality thing. It's like you just hook these things up together. It's like, it would take forever to do, 10 years ago. So we really are shaking our fists.
yeah, there was, I hosted a Pi Ladies meetup last night, and there were some women that are undergrads at UC Santa Cruz that came to that, and they had been at a hackathon from a few weeks ago where they had made a like period tracker app that used Alexa skills, and it was something where you could like talk to this thing and kind of just describe how your period flow was, and this I don't know what they had done. Somehow they had like used Alexa skills and made something that you could just like say arbitrary stuff to, and it would like map it into like these other things that this app was trying to track. And partly I'm like, whoa, that's so cool. And also like, wow, the technology that just lets this happen so easily is also, yeah, amazing.
Yeah, and like, I mean, my own interest in all keeping track with all this is that like, I think that like, you can do so much more with programming now, but it's also super complicated, right? That like nowadays, the bar is a lot higher for these, innovation, right? So you can do conversational interfaces and augmented reality and mobile and smartwatch and stuff. But like I mean, I think we are probably going to enter a phase where it is going to be like that PHP glue code together, except it's going to be like your Alexa code glued with some cloud services, glued with some other things. And it's this mishmash. And then like, Google or, Microsoft changes or Amazon changes their cloud service API or has some weird restrictions, and your stuff like breaks then. So it's like, I'm kind of saying like we're all becoming like distributed systems engineers now, right? Like it or not. And it's very different than like, open a window, write your code in one thing and like everything works. So in a way it's gotten better, and it's also gotten more daunting. But it's also like, from the third perspective, like I don't actually get to write code that much anymore. So I just like try to learn about this stuff and pretend like I know about it. So like all the machine learning stuff we talk about, like I just have students who look into it, or I'm just curious myself. So I watch a lot of talks and listen to podcasts and try to like absorb this vicariously. But, I kind of call myself like, I try to be like a technical product manager, right? I try to be more of a PM, but like sort of know stuff technically, but I actually don't. I mean, I am a concern because I don't know how all this stuff feels now, right? Like, I don't have that hands-on experience with these machine learning frameworks and stuff. So I don't know what's possible or not. I just see the demos and think, oh, that sounds cool. So I'm doing like the annoying advisor thing of being like, oh yeah, just easy, just do it.
Yeah, just plug these things together. Like I saw the demo online, it should be no problem to figure out.
Yeah, I
And
read
then
the paper. It
someone
seems
that's like,
doable. Yeah, just do it.
yeah, and then someone that's like kind of new to navigating this space might just be like, I have no freaking clue how to plug all these pieces together and debug all of the innards of some, yeah, Google Cloud, Amazon, like when they bit rot away and the documentation doesn't stay up to date. And
Yeah, it's just like I am really fascinated by this because it's like I mean, just from a learning perspective, right? Like I mean, this is I give a research talk kind of part of my soapbox version of my talk is about this is that like we do so much for like introductory programming, CS1, kind of teaching like, okay, here's the nuts and bolts of how to write code. There's Python, there's Java, you just, there are if statements, for loops, you have to do that. Obviously, you have to know what variables are in writing code, but like, then like, students are like, oh, I want to go and make this hackathon project. Or I want to go interview for this internship. Like, I need to make these projects for stuff. And like, they hit this huge cliff, right? Because they're like, okay, I learned all the stuff in my CS courses. Great. I can do object-oriented programming. I can like do some data analysis and stuff, but like, how do I actually make this Alexa thing and like use AWS, whatever stuff? Like so much, like you don't really learn any of that in your classes. And it's a lot of it is just kind of getting mentors and fiddling with it and picking it up. So I'm curious about all these meetups and these sorts of events, and maybe that provides that bridge, right? I know you've been involved in some of these.
yeah, so I am living in Santa Cruz and I'm running the Santa Cruz PyLadies meetup. So it's a meetup for women interested in the Python programming language. And I started it partly because I was just like, where are the women in tech in Santa Cruz? I'm not sure. I will make something to have them come to me. And then partly I was like, I like Python. I know there's a community around Python. I know PyLadies is a thing. So I might as well like attach to this and get set up that way. And the structure of my meetup happens every 2 weeks, and sometimes it's a speaker from the community talking about stuff. And then on the other weeks, like alternating back and forth, there is a project night. But project night might be like kind of the wrong thing to call it, because the format that it's taken that people seem to enjoy is that we all work on something together, like a big kind of pair programming, group programming thing where I am sitting at my computer and my computer is projected up on the screen, and we do something together. And like last night we had one of these meetups, and we made a Hello World app on App Engine.
Oh, cool.
And
So
like,
how many people kind of get this? It's like a mob programming, right? It's like a pair programming times 10. How many people is that to coordinate?
so there were about 10 people at this meetup, but I was the only one like at a laptop.
Right. But
Everyone else
everyone's
is,
looking at that. That's really interesting.
yeah, people are looking, they're like helping decide like what should we do next? Should we try to like make this into HTML? Should we try to add an image here? Should we try to add like something more Pythonic, like some current date that's in here? And then when people had questions like, okay, we should save a version of this, then some people are like, how do you do that? And other people are like, we should use Git, we should use GitHub, we should put it on GitHub now. And so we like kind of go on a tangent to explore that. And like any question that anyone has, thinking like in the example last night, I was trying to set up everything from scratch. Like I had like practiced a little bit before the meetup, like, is this even possible? And I figured that like, yeah, it is possible. Google Cloud Services and App Engine actually makes it quite easy to deploy a Hello World app in like 30 minutes. So then I kind of like deleted all the files from my computer, like tried to like reset everything back to zero, and then do this in front of everyone. And that led to problems because I had like authenticated with my personal Gmail account, and then I was authenticating with the PyLadies Gmail account, and then that one had actually been set up for App Engine, and so it was like, there are permission errors. I was like, I don't know why there are permission errors, but we'll Google this error code and we'll poke around and like collectively bash our heads against this until something makes sense and we get through it, and we did. It was good.
Yeah, that is awesome. Yeah, I mean this Yeah, I mean that illustrates so many things. Right? I mean it's sort of it's like a live programming in front of a class, except the whole class is participating, and it's like we're all in this together. And then also like that this whole environment issue, like when we're doing demos, it's such an issue, right? Because you're like, unless you start off fresh with a new VM or something, you have some lingering stare. It's like, oh, you stayed log in, and then you're like, oh wait, I can't log in again, or and then like someone else does it on their computer and it's like, oh, I'm doing the exact same steps, but my stuff is different because I didn't log in or I didn't, go to the website before and click, two-factor or whatever stuff. Yeah, that's what makes this stuff so complicated.
Yeah, people were saying that they were appreciative of seeing like how quickly I went to Google. Like, they were just like basic like syntactic things. So I was like, let's Google this right now. Let's go to the internet, and it's not all in my head. And so that I think that was reassuring for them to see. In addition to like, oh, this is something that you can kind of stumble through. What else did they say was good to see? I think that was the main one of like, this is possible to do this. It's not like it can be big and scary. Like, go, yeah, just go make an app on App Engine and like figure out Google Cloud stuff and all of this. Like, if I think if you were like new to putting all these pieces together, there'd be lots of places to get trapped and then like no way to get untrapped. But to see that there is a path through, it's like, oh, this can be done. So like now I know it's not hopeless, and maybe I'm a little bit more optimistic about trying it for myself.
Yeah, and I think just like that knowledge that, as people who are more experienced in this, messing with computers or whatever this thing is, right? This is not programming, it's messing with your configuration so stuff can work. And like if you get more experience and you kind of know coming in that you conjecture that it is possible, it just will, people have obviously set this up before because, Google App Engine is widely used. And so it's not just some project that one person put online without documentation. But it is possible, but you have to be able to get there and like showing people that yeah, I mean, traditionally, a lot of times in these meetups, they do have the traditional pair programming, right? So this is interesting because it's the let's just do it all together, and then maybe you can mix it up with, you can just do your own thing, and then maybe somebody who is more experienced can pair with you and such. But yeah, I think these sorts of meetups and small group events like hacker spaces and stuff is really essential because you know it's otherwise it's so isolating to just learn on your own, right? Even though in theory all the information's there, you can just Google for everything in theory.
Yeah. And there's like a culture of, yeah, you can learn it on your own. Go teach yourself. It's all out there already. But in practice, it's like it works for some people, but for other people, like without that social structure, it's I don't know how you make progress. Like I've got a social structure that helps me make progress. And so I want to like provide that to other people.
Yeah, and there was this like this is a few years ago, but there was this like Boston Python meetup that like Jessica McKellar and other folks organized, and I didn't ever go, but they said that they actually scaled up like a fair amount. Like they were very much inclusive for beginners and novices, and they managed to scale up this format fairly big, and it was a big emphasis on this. We're just going to get, we have some simple workshops to get you started, but it really is just getting started doing it, having mentors go around. You don't need that many mentors, right? You just have, it's like having TAs in a lab, right? You have a few mentors go around and just giving people a space to work. And like, I think they often had some companies sponsor them, right? Like after work at some office, they can just, have a conference room or something. But like, I think those things are like, they're really important, but like they take people to run, right? Like people aren't paid to run this. These are all volunteer grassroots efforts like yours, but they're really important.
Yeah. Do you know how frequent that event took
Yeah, let
place?
me look it up. I can I haven't because I know that Jessica's out in San Francisco. I mean, she's doing some startup thing and there's this other guy, Ned Batchelder, who is he's works at edX and he ran, I think, a lot of this Boston Python meetup. But like, people get busy with jobs, right? It's like people, especially as they get more senior in their jobs, like they get busier. And if you just need to find people to pass on that torch to run that. And like, it's obvious to say, but like these communities are just run by people, right? They really just consist of people. So, you know, for a few years it might run really well because of the people in charge, but then especially these volunteer grassroots efforts, like if the people move or they go on to do other things, it's hard to sustain these things.
Yeah. Yeah. And either part of the original effort has to be involving like finding more people that are interested in sustaining it, or maybe accepting that times change and situations change, and like some event or some thing can like rise and exist for a while and then like go away again, and that's okay.
Yeah, and part of that is like imagine, another thing to think about is if you can create instructional materials or videos or things that kind of last longer, right? So some of these workshops, they make tutorials, they make blogs, they make those things, and like that can help pass that knowledge down. I mean, it is work. But so are you involved in this Bang Bang Con thing? Is that something you're involved in, or is that just something that you
I
know about?
It's gonna happen here in Santa Cruz and the Bang Bang Con West. I am gonna go. Like I have tickets to it, but I'm not involved otherwise. I did submit a talk proposal, but didn't. Must have been like many other amazing things. So I'm looking forward to going and seeing
Cool. Yeah, I mean I
what.
had Lindsay Cooper on the podcast many, many years ago, back when she was still at Intel, and she was talking about Bang Bang Con, like the non-West version, I guess, the East or
Yeah,
whatever the original version was. And then I also had Julia Evans on, and like, we went to this Recurse Center thing, and that was this Recurse Center, which I guess it was called Hacker School back then. Like that's one of these places that have been trying to sustain this sort of free form peer learning sort of space, but it's one of the places that are trying to sustain that. But like they are a company, right? Like they are a recruiting company. I mean they're open about that, right? They're Y Combinator funded, and they have to sustain themselves through job fairs and recruiting stuff. And I think that's fine, because a lot of the people who come, they want to transition to software or data science type jobs. So it seems to synergize well. But they've been running it for like 6 or 7 years now. But I talked to some of the organizers from time to time, and like it is a challenge, right? Because it's something that is, you know, there is this idealism of keeping this space really pure, but then there's the financial aspect of we need to sustain ourselves and grow and all the other stuff. So yeah, again, other things that I'm so interested in, but I don't have time to do. So I just kind of talk to people who do these things.
yeah. Is the structure of the Recurse Center like? I think I looked at the podcast with Lindsay, and because I wanted to know what is Bang Bang Con, what is going to Santa Cruz, and then I'd like tried to look at the Recurse Center as well, and it seems like you go to it for a period of time and you're like immersed in it for weeks or months, or like do you know what's the structure of it like?
Yeah, so
It's
they've
like a
been experimenting.
sabbatical kind
Yeah,
of.
they've been experimenting with the structure, but I think the basic structure is that they have cohorts or batches, and each batch is I think 3 months, but I think they're experimenting with shorter batches, maybe 6 weeks or 4 weeks or something, and they would overlap them. So the nice thing about it, I mean, it's same thing with like MOOCs, right? The nice thing about a batch is that everyone starts at the same time, so you have a cohort, right? So like the people, it's their first day there, so like everyone is awkward and making friends, and then as you go onward, you kind of cheer each other on. So they kept with the batch thing, but then it's a challenge of a longer batch because you can admit fewer people. So they're trying to do overlapping batches so that some of the people are already farther along, so they can help out onboard the new people. But the base structure is really it's completely unstructured, so that you go and they basically, I think the only structure is that every morning you do a check-in, just kind of a stand-up meeting, kind of just talking about your goals for the day or the week and such. And I think that's like they probably added a little more structure, but at least when I went there as a visitor just to check it out, I never spent the like 3 months there. I went as a speaker, basically, like as a guest speaker. So there's sometimes a guest speakers and other people come by for a day. And the idea there is they're looking for people who want to spend that 6 weeks and or 12 weeks or such, just trying to be better as a programmer. So like, someone like yourself is like the perfect, it's like someone like people like you are probably perfect for that. Like people who are, somewhat tech, the people actually really interesting because they try to not say it's a boot camp. So there are people with very little programming experience who go on. And then there are people like yourself who are much more experienced and have, decades or so of programming experience. And the goal is that you just want to, they describe it as a writer's retreat for programmers. So it's just a place for you to improve your craft. You can work through a course, you can build something, you can grab another person who's there and both work on something together. Like you can work on something together with 10 people. It's basically anything goes. And their goal is basically to, foster this community and this alumni community as well, that they have, probably hundreds or thousands of alumni at this point who've gone through the program. And then, financially, what happens is at the end, they do have a demo and a job fair. So employers would, come, and if you get recruited by one of the employers, then they get a cut of, it's just like a coding boot camp. They get some cut of the recruiting fee. But they really try to, I remember when I was talking to them, they really try to decouple this. Oh, I want to get a job, so I want to try to make a project so that I can demonstrate my skills, or I want to learn, Python for data science and make a cool project about data science, go on a data science job, versus I just want to learn this stuff and not think about the job as much. And I think that's always a delicate balance. So one thing they've done, I think, is they've held specific for like programming jobs, right? Like coding interviews, whiteboard interviews. I think they've held specific workshops like once a week or something for like, this is the day where if you want to study for a programming interview, you can just come in, after hours. We're just going to do programming interview prep. And the hope is that time is just enough for you to get that urge out so that the rest of the time you don't have to think about job stuff. But like, yeah, you have to interview at the end. So you do need to study for that. So it is, because I think they don't want it to be like a regular coding boot camp where it's like, okay, clearly we have a curriculum, we're going to learn React, and we're going to like prep you for JavaScript interviews to get a job, right? And boot camps have their place, but they're trying to remain unique in that way. So that was my long-winded.
Yeah, no, the part about like go here and practice your craft. Yeah, that sounds great. I wish I want that. I want that now. But also like I have a family and a kid, and like I can't go far away places for extended periods of time. And are there like online distributed remote ways to get that?
Yeah,
I
I think
wonder.
this distributed mentorship thing is really key. I mean, thinking about in the age where the technology is all available, it's finding the I know some people have done this with like language learning, right? Like immersive language learning. I mean, it's something as simple as if you just organize people to Skype with each other, once a week or twice a week to like talk about their families or whatever. You're like, we have to speak Spanish or whatever. So yeah, I wish there was that for like, for programming and for technical things. But like, I think it's unfortunate that a lot of online discourse about technical things is probably not the most healthy environments, which is, something that is a even bigger challenge, I think. Yeah. So that, the hacker school, that was what they used to call it. It's called the Recurse Center now. They made one of their things they're known for are these sorts of social norms they try to encourage, right? So they have these lightweight social rules that that other, things like code of conduct and stuff for conferences have adopted. And the idea there is like the nice thing about being in person is that they can really establish these sorts of social norms early on, and they want to make it this supportive environment. I think that kind of goes a long way in building their community, and that's, I think, a very much harder thing to do online, right?
A couple years ago, well, when I was still in grad school, there was I think Rob Miller was running this paired research like program thing. Like it was kind of informal, but I wound up in the pool of people, and every week some people from different universities, I think it was mostly at MIT, but expanded to UW and stuff like that. People would get paired with each other, and then they'd like have to meet up during the week and like kind of like help each other with their work or just like talk about their work. And it was like that was really cool to use that time to kind of have someone else like guide me to, I'm trying to work out this problem and I think you could help. And so I'm going to choose to use this time to talk to you about this particular problem or like show off a demonstration or something. And then you have enough kind of shared knowledge that you can give useful feedback. And then we'll flip that around and I will see if I can contribute to you getting something useful done. And that like, I wish for that again as well. Like that seemed like it was a small enough group and also informal enough and kind of it probably existed for a while and then went away. Maybe it still exists. And it was like, this is just like a little nugget of something valuable Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome you brought that up. So I was a postdoc in Rob's group for a year, 2013, 2014. And yeah, that was when they had run it for a while, and they started at MIT, just within his group locally, and they experimented with expanding it out to, to people remotely. I mean, the challenge remote is just scheduling, right? Because if you're there in person, there's a social pressure, right? Like if you're on the lab, then like you just find a time to do it, even though like in person some people have, they have classes. If they're undergrads in the lab, they have classes and such. But yeah, I think that it's so doable, and I think a big part of that, like you said, is curating the set of people. I mean, you don't want to turn into like a chat roulette thing of like, oh my god, some random weird dude from across the world I have to pair with you for half an hour. It's so weird.
Yeah, it was definitely people that I like. I'm glad that I like got to meet them and got to work with them for a little bit, through this thing. And maybe that was more valuable for me coming kind of from the outside and like meeting the people that are in this other group at this other university mostly, because I got exposure to that. And it was probably a completely different experience for them being like all together and like using it in a different way.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool thing for, I mean, other stuff that I will just tell other people to do because I don't have the capacity to do it myself. But I think that this grad student, this, what I tell a lot of grad students now is that like you're the distributed pool of students around the country and, to a certain extent around the world, like those are your colleagues in your field, right? Like, let's say an HCI or an AI or whatever. I mean, however broad you define it, or computer science, even like, in you are now all at different schools, you're working in different research groups on different projects, but like in 5 years you're going to be graduating, and 10 years you're going to be in mid-level positions, whether in companies or at universities or in like funding agencies and stuff, and that ecosystem continues to rise. And like in 20 years time, like I mean, I literally, this is what I tell the students, I'm like, in 20 years time you're going to be running the field, like HCI or AI, whatever. That's literally going to be what you all are doing. Like it doesn't matter what I do, it's like you all are going to be doing this. And so like that, building that community, I mean, people already do it through conferences and such, but I love this idea of this really lightweight way of just either doing a pair of research or just even like a Slack channel or something where people can just be on kind of passively and kind of ping each other and such. Online communities are challenging, right? Like if you have a lot of people, online communities are challenging to maintain, but I really like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm thinking of Slack channels that I'm in. Like at work, we have a Slack channel. And I've been remote for the company the entire time. So like Slack was the main way that I interacted with my colleagues. But there's like a Slack channel for PyLadies, but it's not used very much. There's a Slack channel that like another group of my friends run, but it's a lot of people that I don't know, and they talk about like in-depth like Docker container stuff, like stuff that I'm like, I don't know how to like get involved in this
All right.
community here. It's not quite what I'm looking for on a daily basis, or I don't know how to use it to my advantage. Yeah, and so it's hard, like
Yeah, maybe
finding them,
even
maintaining
small
them, and reading.
cohorts. Maybe the way to start is really small cohorts, right? You don't need that. Maybe it's just like those 4 or 5 people that are across the country or wherever. And like, I guess the trick is you want this small tight cohort, but you also want that serendipity of having a lot of weak ties, like outside, right? Like, because then, one of these people, maybe you post this Slack channel or whatever, and they're like, oh yeah, I totally know about this Python library thing because I was using it. And like, they were using it for a completely different purpose. So we have a few more minutes, and I want one idea I want to run by you is it reminded me of when I was in grad school. What I really wanted to do, but again, had no ability to do because I probably had other stuff to do, was I wanted to make a map of like our computer science building. I was at Stanford, but like UW's the same, right? It's like a giant computer science building. And back then, like people weren't as mobile, right? Because we had laptops, and mostly we were on, clunky desktops. And the cool thing about being on clunky desktop computers is that you had a fixed location. Like you were usually in a certain place in the lab, and now people are just working everywhere. So the cool thing is like if you just had an app or whatever that just showed who was in the building at what times. Like as long as you opt into it, right? You're like, I want to opt into this, telepresence thing. Then like you could really just ping people or just like do this kind of impromptu thing where you just ping everyone on your floor, like either a technical question that you're working on or say what you're working on, or even like, oh, who wants to get food or whatever, because you kind of know who is around. And people normally do this just by walking around their floor. But I found like in a really big building or a big community, people are working on such different things. But like I feel like that grad student community can be more closely knit with some technology. So like I always felt strongly about that because like I felt like, it's a trend for a lot of grad students to just be, really siloed in their own lab and their own research area. And they have so much to gain by learning from people in different areas.
Yeah. Many thoughts on that. Like I so I'm in this co-working space now called Next Space in Santa Cruz, and it has this big open area where lots of people sit with their laptops. Then I have a desk that's kind of like in the back corner that's more isolated. But anytime that I'm just like kind of bored or like want social stimulation or intellectual stimulation, I'll walk out into the main area and I'll like talk to people, and maybe I'll get food with them, or maybe I'll just kind of like, bother someone like, what are you working on? Like, I'm going to unload some of my like ideas, and you can do the same. And um and I think at UW that was possible too. Like there were windows on a lot of the labs, and so you could walk around and like see who was there and like look for people that might be open to some sort of conversation or like a change of scenery, a change of pace. And so I like the idea of like being able to know that maybe in some digital way, especially if the building itself doesn't let you see. Like UC Santa Cruz a few weeks ago, there wasn't any power on campus, and so all of the professors, my husband was telling me this, like were walking around in the halls and like had all these conversations because like they were like wandering about more frequently than they usually do, and it was great. And that building otherwise is like not set up for more serendipitous
Yeah, I mean, most
like
buildings are just, yeah,
interactions.
like in Stanford. I mean, most buildings are just like an office building with rows of hallways, right? And yeah.
Yeah. And even socially, like I want to be able to say like I am up for hanging out with someone now, or like, but I don't know how to like ping everyone. Like I could ask
Yeah.
individual people, but it might take too long to get that back and forth. I just kind of want to just say like, hey, I'm I'm open to socializing now.
Yeah,
Who
I think
else is
that's where the
open to
online thing can
socializing?
actually help, right? Because it is awkward to like poke your head out every 30 minutes, say, hey, who wants to hang out? But if you're online, you just have this presence and say, like, it's kind of a status message almost, right? It's like I'm green or yellow. It's like
Yeah.
I'm around. And like for this co-working space is interesting because it's like you can have a norm where if you're sitting in the open area, that means that you're open to people interrupting you. And if you don't want people interrupting you, you should go to the quiet area or the office or something. So like these things can help.
Yeah, yeah. And it is mostly like that, other than there's also like a price difference of if you pay more, you can have like a secluded place that you can always go to. But in the open seating area, there are some more quiet rows. So you can get away if you don't want to be interrupted, but it's still kind of adjacent to the open area. So it's like not as isolated
So
as
are
you might
people in
want.
this open space, are they like working on startup stuff or are they like working on more open-ended researchy kinds of things?
A lot of people in this space here are like local business and creative people. So there's people doing graphic design and photography and running nonprofits for things like marine biology, something in the Downtown Business Association. There's like lots of random things, and then there's some not random, but like it's a variety of all kinds of things. It's not that much tech. There's like some tech, and there's some people like me and a person that sits near me that work remotely for tech companies. And so so it's like a little bit less technical overall. Um, but there was like a lunch meeting just now, which is why I was a little bit late. That was on like nonprofit businesses, like just sort of advice about them, and how like a big takeaway of this is like maybe you shouldn't actually start a nonprofit, but if you do, you should really think about the like user-centered design of this thing. Like, is it necessary? Is it needed? Is it going to meet the people that need it? Are they going to use it in the way that you expect? And it was like this is like an outside thing, but like the idea is totally mapped to other things that I think about.
Yeah, I mean that's actually really fascinating because like I was thinking, if it's one of these very Silicon Valley tech oriented startup things, like people might not want to talk to you, both because they're so busy, like, oh, I need to grind on this feature. And also it's like, oh, this is like proprietary stuff. But like, yeah, if it's like a space where creatives come together and if people are doing video editing or photo stuff or like even making websites for local business, like I can see how people are more open to these exchanges and it's not just like, oh, I'm making like my latest startup, I need to pitch to the investors like next week, I gotta like heads down grind on this.
Yeah, it's pretty open and like lots of room for connection and lots of people are open to it and it's really nice.
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I other dreams of mine that I don't have time to do is I'm like fairly into obviously video and like photo and all that stuff, but like I don't, I like all I watch on YouTube are like these independent creators where I like watch people who are podcasters and video editors and like indie filmmakers and stuff. And I'm like, okay, that's me in a parallel universe, but I like, you know, majored in computer science and like coded and stuff. So I'm like, okay, but I want to live this like glamorous indie life.
Yeah. Yeah, I watch a lot of those folks on YouTube too, especially ones that have like they've really grown and evolved over the last many years, and the YouTube has become this amazing platform for them, and they've gotten so much better at their craft.
Yeah, and I mean I take a lot of inspiration from that because yeah, I mean I think that a lot of, even in traditional kind of academic research in a really applied field, right? In things like computer science and HCI and like very applied AI fields, like I think that there's a lot of inspiration we can draw from designers and from people out in the world like that. That yeah, if you're a theoretical mathematician, you're probably it's not, watching YouTube is probably not as relevant to you, but I think like there's something because like these sorts of creativity things, or it's just like that's just my way to spend, that's my way to spend time. I rationalize that's how I spend my time.
I relate. Same, yeah. It's like this is like getting the creative brain juices flowing. This is totally a valid use of time. Same with Twitter. Like so much to learn on Twitter.
Exactly. Any last call to action or other links or other things related to, thinking about the millions of fans you have out there who are going to be watching?
Um, I can't think of anything awesome to say right now. I should post more pictures of my own cats online. It's all
Yeah.
been my kid, but like my cat is pretty great too.
Yeah. Well, cat pictures are always good. They're good for computer vision and other demos. Cats and dogs are great for AI. They're great ambassadors
Yeah,
and such.
and and eventually, like I want to make more things be more visible. Okay, here's a good closing thing. Like after being in a startup for a while and like we're working for like raising money and doing all these things and it's kind of secret what we're doing or lots of things should be kept secret. I've realized like I want to be a lot more open with what I'm making. I want to be able to talk about it and all the little nuances and like make things that people can use and say like here I made this weird thing, like try it out, go take it and like show me what weird things you can do with it. And later, like in like next month in March, I'm going to go to the Game Developers Conference, and I think that's going to be a big thing of like people that make games are always making things for people to use and play with, and like just sort of put in the hands of other people. And so yeah, and this freedom of like whatever I'm going to do now, I hope it's like building more things that more people can use that I can like share more openly, and it's going to be great.
Yeah, that's an awesome note to end on. And yeah, I think that's that ethos of I think that kind of gets back to what I was interested in talking to you. But like, yeah, that ethos of openness and sharing and this sort of kind of creative mindset, I think is really key because most people are in very corporate settings where you are, your day job is working on some internal code base that you can't just, go and print out and share with everybody, right? I mean, there are very standard product release cycles and PR and everything, and it's less independent, right? But whereas I think as technologists, we have this, and especially now in 2019, and like we have this ability to just make stuff and show stuff. And like going back to the very beginning, like all this stuff is so demoable just online and stuff. So I'm looking forward to seeing, seeing where you take this in the next months and years.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, well, thanks
Thanks
for coming
for.
on. We'll chat a bit more offline, but thank you for coming on.
Okay, cool. Thanks for having me. It's great.